is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 161. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCASimmons, and at Night Sports Now. We're back. UCF beat Villanova 48-14 on Saturday night. Feels like, I don't know, maybe it's just been I've been busy, but it feels like a long time ago. But we're already on to Kansas State. Before we get into a couple of things we wanted to touch on from Villanova and then the Kansas State preview, Christian, how are you?
I'm doing well. UCF is 3-0 for the first time since 2019, so this is the latest I've ever gotten to fall without having depression or anxiety in a few years, so that's exciting.
It's good.
How are you? I never ask back. You ask me how I am, and I say, great, so UCF, and that's sort of how the podcast goes.
Great. Yeah, I feel good. UCF's 3-0, so that's not the cause of my depression and anxiety. We're 3-0 going into kind of Big 12 play. Excited about it. I mean, I'm not anticipating a win on Saturday, but I'm still kind of just like, yeah, this is great. It's gonna be fun.
So I realized the headspace I'm in, it's not going to be fun if they lose bad. The headspace I'm in is that, because we've basically been saying it since the summer, and nothing that's happened in the first 3 games of the season has made me feel differently, that I don't expect UCF to win this game. That's not to say I don't think they can win this game. Those are two very different things. I easily believe they can win this game. I just am not expecting it because Kansas State is a really good team. They won the Big 12 last year. They have a lot of very, very large players, and UCF is still kind of working up to that level. It's going to be tough. And I feel that way. And then I went to check on Kansas State's 247 site just to see what the vibe was. And it was like, oh, well, yeah, we lost to Missouri, but we got an easy bounce back game this week. And someone was like, I'd take us by 28 against UCF. And people were like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And I'm just like, I believe that UCF will not win, but I've decided it's not okay for Kansas State fans to believe that. Like, only I am allowed to not believe in my team. Like, I got very upset by those comments, even though I also think UCF is going to lose.
Yeah, it's like a sibling or friend thing where it's like you can make fun of your sibling or friend just like about random stuff. But if someone else says it, like from the outside, someone else says it, you get really defensive and you're like, no, only I can say that. Only I can say exactly UCF can lose. That's what it is. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I didn't realize that there's a perception that they're going to win by 28.
That is just a perception. Like I feel 100% confident saying right now that UCF will not lose by 28. Knock on wood. But yeah.
Continue to keep that out there.
Yeah.
I think what's good is if they lose by 28, then the vibes are really going to turn quickly, but I think they'll be able to handle it.
What's an acceptable amount they can lose by that the fan base isn't going to, like, the fan base will be upset obviously if they lose, but what's an amount they can lose? What's the most points they can lose by that the fan base won't be bailing on the season? 10?
Yeah, I would say like 10, 12.
Probably feels like 10.
Yeah. Depends on how though. Like if it's like, I don't know.
That's a good point.
Because there's different ways. Like if they lose like 47-35, that feels different than if you lose like 28-16, where you're like, oh, the offense is kind of.
Is it weird that I would feel better about 28-16? Like UCF giving up 47 points in their first Big 12 game would like deeply alarm me for what the rest of the season could bring. I also don't see that happening at all, especially not with Kansas State having some questions about their quarterback's health and all that.
Yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll get on to our 5-star review question now before we touch back on a couple Villanova things and then talk about K-State. But the 5-star review question said, one simple question, where is Bowman? Of course, referring to DeMarcus Bowman, who got the first carry in week 1, got the first carry in week 2, and then didn't get a carry until late in week 3. And then I think he got banged up on that play. That's where he is.
He is on the bench.
He has 10 carries this year.
62 yards.
It's a pretty good average.
I mean, yeah, 6.2 average. So I've been thinking about this, and not that he was part of this transfer class anyway, but like UCF really just hasn't hit on any transfers, huh? Like, sure, you've got like Marcellus Marshall is starting and Drake Metcalf. So I guess on the O-line they hit where they needed to.
Well,
but
see about Drake Metcalf.
Drake Metcalf, yeah. Well, I guess I was going to get to that a little later, but yeah, so Drake Metcalf, as we talked about, was benched after a couple false start penalties in a play where the ball ended up on the ground and Tim McLean had to do some magic, and Gus was asked at the presser today, what's the status of Drake Metcalf? And Gus's reply was, we have a competition now at center. Which is interesting because I thought Metcalf had been playing fine outside of the pen. Like, I'm not going to, false starts are bad, and Caden Kittler's just a redshirt freshman, so I was surprised by that, but I thought Kittler looked fine when he was in, so who knows?
I'll say it. Where was that energy with the quarterback last year?
I don't know.
Like this is the thing that he's like, oh, we can't. I mean, obviously, yeah, you don't want to have penalties. But like, he's like, it was one game. It was in issues. I mean, unless it went back to the first two games, but I don't remember anything.
There were a couple. There were a couple issues in the first two games, like but once or twice. But
it's just like, all right, now you might have just lost your job here, buddy. But then it's just like, oh no, it's fine.
I'll bet right now, like I could be wrong. I'm wrong about plenty of things, but I feel like it's going to be Metcalf on Saturday. I still feel like this is just, he wasn't correcting what they want him to correct. And it's a mental thing. And they were like, we're going to show him that we need business and that he's not going to play if he's not going to fix this. I think
Metcalf on a short leash probably would be my guess, because if those issues like come up again, that's it. He's done.
Yeah, if he starts and then there's a false start or a bad snap, like at that point, I think they're ready to move on. But I think what's extra funny about it is it feels like it was almost even more insulting than just keeping him out the whole game, as Metcalf then came back in when they subbed in the second string guys late in the game, and that weirdly felt more insulting to me than if he just stayed out the rest of the game.
Yeah, but yeah, anyway, DeMarcus Bowman.
I guess I don't know. We heard all offseason that he was awesome.
Yeah, I don't know where that went. And I'm still just hoping that out of nowhere he just breaks out, but he can't break out if they don't give him carries. And I don't know now. I don't know if he's still banged up from that one play or if it was just kind of a shaken up thing. But it doesn't seem like he's much of a factor, which is kind of sad.
Which is fine. I mean, they have RJ Harvey, who's one of the best backs of recent years for UCF. They have Johnny Richardson, who's also there. So they're fine. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, don't know. There has to be something we're missing. I don't know if it's that he can't block. I don't know if it's that he can't take care of the ball. There's something we're missing, because otherwise it doesn't make sense like I said, what makes it weird to me is that it's unusual to have a whole offseason where there was a lot of hype around a player and not fan-generated hype, like internal actual hype of, oh, this guy's crazy. Wait till you see this guy. He looks great in practice. He did this crazy thing and that crazy thing. Then the season rolls around, he just doesn't play. It's very strange. So I don't know.
It was the whole, like, we talk about, press conference, like when somebody gets asked about a certain player, like, don't take anything they say seriously. But it was like, oh, who stood out in practice? A very general question. And people be like, oh, DeMarcus Bowman's just like, he's just flying. Like, he's crazy.
It was also outside people who were visiting practice and things like that were coming away like, wow, Bowman looked crazy. Like, just so I have no idea. It's just further evidence of why predicting anything in the offseason is pointless. Because when in this offseason ever would I predicted that Bowman would be a complete non-factor for UCF? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. Can't wait till next offseason when we're asking people, hey, keep listening to us predict these things, because
it's still fun. Like, it's fun to think you know what's going to happen.
It's still fun. It just is pointless as long as we recognize that. I think it's okay.
So I got to say, I listen to a lot of college football podcasts. One of my favorites is the Athletics feed, even post Andy Staples leaving, and Ari Wasserman, who sometimes makes me want to scream with his takes on college football, but is a really good podcaster. And he said something that I loved, because someone was getting at him for like, why didn't you thought that Colorado was going to suck and they were going to go 3-9. And now what do you have to say? And he said on the podcast, what I have to say is that if I could accurately predict the games, I would be living in a house that looks like Lincoln Riley's right now. And I'm like, that's accurate. Like no one knows what's going to happen. That's why we like college football, is you can't predict it, but
yeah. All right, we can just jump into the things we missed from Villanova, and neither of the things we're going to talk about are related to the actual game itself.
What else do you want us to talk about? Like, UCF looked good against the bad team.
I even looked back at like the box score, some of the stats, and I'm like, is there anything? I'm like pretty sure we did a good job of touching on absolutely everything. And
I rewatched the entire game on Sunday and came up with nothing to talk about.
Yeah,
like I was like, we covered it.
So what we can talk about is this whole Zombie Nation thing that everybody is going crazy about. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I didn't really notice it. I thought the only thing I noticed for the Kent State game was when they normally play Zombie Nation as like right before the team is running out, and they usually play it like as they're in the tunnel, and like you get a little bit of it. It felt very quick for the first game. It just seemed like a missed time thing. I didn't really notice the rest of that game, or I mean on TV on Saturday, them not playing it. And then Mohajer and the UCF fan experience account came back with the receipts for how much they played it, and it's just like, all right, I don't know.
So let's map out a timeline here. Let's just map out a timeline and chronologically discuss what's happened in Zombie Nation Gate, which is what we're now calling this. Is as early as the Kent State game, which was the home game before this one, there were some fans on Twitter who after the game were like, why didn't we play Zombie Nation before? It feels like we're playing it less. I saw like a few of those tweets. I didn't think about it one way or the other, because like I can't put into words how little I care how long songs are played at the Bounce House Zombie Nation or not. Like, I really can't even state to you guys how dumb of a thing this is to care about to begin with.
Well, that's because you're not allowed to jump up and down in the press box, so this doesn't concern you.
I wonder how quickly I'd be kicked out if I just started doing that. Like I just stood up in my seat and just started like jumping up and down.
Does that constitute? They say no cheering in the press box. Does that constitute cheering? Or you just?
I've always laughed because when back in the day, like I'm going to put you guys listeners into the shoes of if you're a journalism student at UCF, and they really like from the second you're covering the team, like way back in the day, like when we were student journalists and because they were UCF back then, I don't know if they are now, was very good about like letting student journalists have opportunities to cover teams, both football and otherwise, talk to players. And they would talk about how, this is a professional press box. This is a professional setting. There's no cheering. Like people are working and you do. And like, I hope that fans understand that is something you take seriously. Like people are there doing their jobs and it's not like it's like an office. People are working. And I remember that one of the things they said was they were really talking to people about like, you really have to not cheer. And I know it can be really hard to not cheer. And they were going over ways with the students to like quietly cheer without having to, like, they were like, you could like fist pump under the table if something happens, or you could like nod your head. And I'm just like, are there people who are just so like can't control themselves to the point that like I have to do something if UCF scores? Like I can't just sit there like a normal human being. I always found that interesting. So. Anyway, all that to be said, Kent State game, people are like, why aren't they playing Zombie Nation more? This game happens. I don't know. I heard Zombie Nation a few times. Again, I'm not in the press box with a stopwatch. Like, let's see how long it's hitting.
There he is.
And Terry is. Oh my Lord. And then after the game, bunch more of stuff on Twitter. Like a lot of fans are like, we need to fire the TJ. What's going on? Why does UCF hate its own fan base because it's not playing Zombie Nation? All that is fine. The baffling part to me is that the UCF fan experience account, which has been around for like 3 weeks, just showed up one day and was like, hello, we're in the UCF account, goes through meticulously and replies to everyone. This wasn't one tweet, replies to everyone with the timestamps of how long they played Zombie Nation and when the game they played it. Over and over again. They do that like 5 times, and I guess the message still isn't getting through. So Terry's like, my turn. And then Terry does the exact same thing. And I don't know who...
I like to think Terry's the one running the other account. He's like, I'll just switch to my account now.
That's what someone said. I was talking about with someone else, and they said, do we think that Terry like was the one sending those tweets and like accidentally signed it to his account or something? Like maybe. I don't know. But I don't know who I'm more baffled by, the UCF fans who are going crazy over this, or UCF athletics for being like, we need to acknowledge this and snuff it out. Like it's the stupidest thing that's happened with UCF Twitter in a while, and that's saying something. I think it means UCF's doing well on the field. Like we've gone to the point where we're now complaining about we're fighting over how many seconds Zombie Nation has played in a game. But yeah, so I don't know. Now I think I am going to keep track of it next home game. I think for the Baylor game, I'm going to send a tweet every time it's played.
Well, I was gonna ask, but then because now that we're on the topic of this, but I feel like you're the wrong person to ask. I'm not sure you're the right person to ask this because how little you care about Zombie Nation being played. But I know in the Kent State game they didn't play that Avicii song, "The Nights," and I was wondering, I was annoyed
they did play
that day. Did they not play it for? They did play it for Villanova. Okay,
they played that for Villanova.
I just forgot week 1.
So okay. I don't like that song either.
Why?
Well, not either. I like Zombie Nation.
I don't like it.
I said either. They always, and it's so funny. I associate that with basketball more than football because they always play the basketball games, and it's like, I don't know. Okay, I'll take that back. It's not that I don't like it. It's that I think it's wild that UCF plays an entire song start to finish because the word night is in it for 1 second. And sure,
I just like it because everybody sings along to it.
The whole stadium's like, it's coming. The night is coming. He's gonna say night, and then he goes, "These are the," and everyone's like, "Nights," and it's like, I don't know. It's not that
better
it's
than
like
Terry's song.
And that's the one that I've actually complained about before. I don't know why the hell Terry's done some things, but it's just, I can't, of all the things to care about this season, I'm over here like, wow, UCF's first ever game, first ever Big 12 league game. This is a moment we've been talking about for decades, literally decades, the idea of UCF playing a power conference league game. And what are the fans on Twitter talking about leading up to the game? Why was Zombie Nation only played for 2 minutes or whatever it was? And UCF Athletics, instead of tweeting like, it's our big week, we're in the Power 5, is like, well, here are the exact seconds that it was. I don't know what we're doing anymore. That will be cured if UCF loses this week, and then people will go back to caring about real things. But if UCF wins, they're going to find something even dumber for next game. They're going to be up there and be like, now I got a Philly cheesesteak from the stand where it was offered, and they did not put peppers on it. Fire Terry Mahajer, like that's, and Scott Carr isn't here to test the bun. Like, what are we going to do?
Unbelievable. Wow. The other thing we had to talk about from the Villanova game was JRP's beard.
JRP has a beard now.
Yeah.
He does have a beard.
Well, I think, I forget who posted it. I think one of some account posted, and I think it was a video of him saying, like, should he keep it or not? And everyone was like, yes, he should keep it. I like it. Looks good.
I thought he looked good with the beard. I thought he's probably a better quarterback with the beard, right? Am I wrong to think that?
He's more of a grizzled veteran. He knows what he's doing with the ball, and he's just that's what comes with it.
He looks like, I think that there's at least one defender who would pull up on a hit if he saw the beard.
All right.
I don't know who that defender is, but someone would. I'm just saying.
Gotta move on. UCF Kansas State this weekend, 8:00 in Manhattan. Almost went to this game and then forgot I had a wedding to go to on Friday.
Did you? I don't remember that.
Yeah, I was planning on going. You were not there. I don't know. What do you mean? Where were you? Probably in Orlando.
You were going to go to a road game without me? I'm offended.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I just realized why
boss,
you would have gone.
Yeah.
It's your Peter report boss. Is
and okay. he's a K-State grad, and he is going, and he said like we were going to go together, and then I remembered, oh wait, I have a wedding to go to on Friday night that I've already RSVP'd to. So.
I've never met that man. He probably does not know my name, and he's one of my favorite people in the world because he gave us our restaurant recommendation list for when we went to Memphis, and I had like 4 of my favorite meals ever. So huge
Everything
shout out
was good.
To Scott. Is that his name?
Yes.
Shout out to Scott.
Everything was good. But yeah, so not going to this game. Instead, you and I will be at Nights Out Pub for the game, and then we have our post-game podcast live from Nights Out Pub after the game.
And we have been promoting this for a few weeks. I want to thank the TV networks for making the game 8 p.m. So we'll now be doing like a midnight podcast from Nights Out Pub, but I'm very excited for it anyway.
I'm so annoyed about that, but yes, I'm still excited about it. And I mean, obviously the big thing is can UCF get on the national radar with a win in its first Big 12 game? I know they're 3-0. They didn't, they don't have any votes in the AP poll. Kansas State dropped out of the AP poll generously after losing to Missouri the week before playing UCF.
So can I make a comment about that real quick?
Yeah.
This is where college football stops making sense to me, is things like this. I'm going to go to bat for the Wildcats for a second here. Is that Kansas State 3 days ago was the number 15 team in the country. Missouri beat them with a 61-yard buzzer-beating kick. I don't fully understand the mentality of a voter where if that 61-yard kick does not go in, then right now Kansas State is like the 13th or 14th best team in the country. But since the kick had those 2 extra yards and did go in, Kansas State is not a top 25 team. That, like, when you think about it like that,
sense.
Doesn't make sense to me. I was pretty shocked they fell out of the poll. I think it's lazy voting because
it was a road game too. It's not like it was like
a road game at an undefeated SEC team. They lost on they lost on the longest field goal in SEC history. And voters are like, wow.
That field goal might have been good, but from like 66, because that wasn't like I was like 61. Like this game's going to overtime, and it was a bomb of a kick. And
voters saw that happen and thought, wow, if that kick hadn't gone in, then I think that you would be like, right on the cusp of being a New Year's 16. But since that kick did go in, I don't think I need to talk or think about you for the rest of the season. Wild mentality, but whatever.
So not a top 25 game for UCF in their first Big 12 conference game, but I mean this is still the defending Big 12 champion. It's still a brand in the Big 12, and UCF's going to their place, and it's going to be difficult. But
yeah,
if they win, it's going to make a lot of noise, I think.
I think so too. And we're seeing, the new 4 are getting their first games. Houston had theirs last week and just got beat up on by TCU in Houston Stadium that still did not get full, even for their Big 12 opener. So we can officially say 1 game into Big 12 play that adding Houston was a mistake. But yeah, I do think that this is, fans have been talking about, because UCF is one of the very few, I think it's just them and Rutgers are the only 2 undefeated Power 5 teams left that do not have any votes in AP. Maybe it's the thing about being Knights. I don't know. But I do think that, because fans are really up in arms about that. I've seen a few comments from fans who are like, they're not paying attention to us. I will say UCF has played 2 games against really, really bad teams. The Kent State game was a gimme game. The Villanova game was a gimme game. Most teams only play one of those games. So I'm not going to get up in arms that UCF hasn't caught anyone's attention yet, especially since Boise hasn't looked good either. So I'm not angry,
I have 0 issue with them having no votes right now.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would. They've not proven to be a team worth AP top 25 votes. I don't know.
There are quite a few teams out there that would be
Kansas
3-0 on UCF schedule, But now if they beat Kansas State, they'll be getting some votes, because I think even though it's once again on FS1, thrilled about that you go on the road and beat the Big 12 champ in your opening game, even though they lost last week, that catches some attention of all of a sudden it's like UCF's 4-0 and just took out Kansas State on the road. I wonder if there's something there, and that gets people thinking about you, and that starts to get you in that national spotlight a little more.
Do you think there's a chance? I guess it would probably depend on the score and how it went.
Yes.
Do you think there's a chance they could get into the 20, go from no votes at all to getting into the top 25 with a win?
Oh, no. No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
No, I don't. I wouldn't think so, but they'd also be 4-0 and 1-0 in Big 12 play. It's the fact out of the top 25 and then they beat Kansas State, then yes, I think they would jump from no votes to the top 25. But
I don't think there's anything they can do in that game that would jump in the top. That's a tough ask to go from no votes to ranked. You don't see that a lot because you also have to understand that means that you need to pool votes to get ranked. It's not like one voter can just be like, I like UC or no. And so they would need a lot of people to be dropping teams out of their ballots to put UCF in. And I don't know what's going to happen this weekend that would make that possible. Some will do it, but it's maybe if Kansas State had won and they're like number 13 right now, then maybe, but I don't see that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know going. I know there's teams that have jumped into the top 25. Where you're like they're ranked. Like Florida being ranked to me was like, really? But I don't know if they had votes or not last week.
They did have votes last week.
They did have votes. Why? What?
You know what? Let me double check now I've said that. I thought they did have votes last week because I thought I remember being annoyed about that. But I'll look it up really quickly.
Because they lost to Utah and then beat whoever they beat last week. I don't even know if they played. But
now I will say, before I know if they had votes or not last week, playing Tennessee in what was probably the most watched game of the week versus playing Kansas State on FS1 where you're going to get 400,000 viewers, not really the same thing.
It also sucks too because there are other big time games right around the 7 o'clock, 7:30 hour on Saturday. So this game's going to get so lost. Which there's nothing you can do about that, but it is just kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I guess Florida was not getting votes last week.
Yeah, but I guess that could be it. It was just the fact that they beat a ranked Tennessee, and I don't know.
And every AP voter in America watched or heard about that game. I don't know how many AP voters in America next Saturday are going to be keeping a close eye on Kansas State UCF.
Ohio State Notre Dame kicking off 30 minutes before UCF, and Kansas State is going to be. It's going to suck a lot of viewers away from that. But
man, it's funny. We're after this weekend we'll be what 1, 2, 3, a third of the way through the season, and UCF's exposure television wise has unquestionably been worse than it was in the AAC, which is crazy. And for Baylor game, it's already been announced it's going to be FS1 or FS2. FS2 didn't even know it's a real channel, so I
knew it was real, but I don't even know if everybody gets it.
YouTube TV does not get it apparently, so good thing it's a home game for me.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate because I feel like it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point where it's like UCF gets a bad TV slot, so it gets bad TV ratings. So then UCF doesn't get a better TV slot because Fox thinks they're just going to get bad TV ratings. They have bad ratings for their 2 games that have been on TV. No one watched Kent State or Boise. They both clocked in around 300,000, which is bad.
And I think the reason for it being FS1 or FS2 for Baylor, that's Baylor's fault. So it's
Baylor's fault and it's UCF's fault. It's not UCF's fault. UCF quite literally could have done nothing differently up to this point, but it's just hopefully it'll be on FS1 at least, not FS2. But yeah, I know Cincinnati fans are bragging. They were like, we're on Fox for our game, and it's like you're playing Oklahoma. It's like you are just the team that happens to be playing Oklahoma, and that's why you got your Fox slot. Congratulations. Hope you feel good about it. Shout out on more the loss to Miami, Ohio, you losers. But yeah,
more people are going to watch them get absolutely clanked. I think that's
you and I had a disagreement on this because I want Cincinnati to beat Oklahoma because we are approaching the nightmare scenario where we get a Texas-Oklahoma conference title game, and I would like that to not happen. So I'm fine with anybody beating Texas or Oklahoma. And you said you do not want Cincinnati to win that game.
No, let them lose to somebody else. And if they don't, it sucks, but nothing I can do about it. I'd rather see Cincinnati fail.
Checks are clearing either way, right? Whether it's a Texas or
quite literally
or
not. Jumping to our key stats here. Since 2017, UCF has played just one road game in front of 50,000 plus fans like they will do on Saturday night. That one game was 2018 USF, which doesn't count.
Because it was mostly UCF fans is the reason that happened. I was pretty stunned by that stat when we looked at it.
You have to go back to Michigan in 2016.
Yep.
Right before for the previous ones. So an atmosphere that UCF has not dealt with in quite a while.
Now, I will say, and Gus brought this up at his presser today, while UCF has not dealt with an atmosphere of that caliber, most of UCF's players at this point have, because they have a lot of transfers. Timmy started multiple games in front of atmosphere like that.
Including Timmy, which I said on Saturday night after the Villanova game, I was like, I just don't think Timmy's played an atmosphere like that. His freshman year, he actually played in 2. He had against NC State, USF played there, and there was over 52,000. And then they played at BYU, where there was 60,000 people there, which I was surprised to find that out for both.
And then guys like Javon and Kobe obviously come from the SEC, so they've seen that. So from that perspective, maybe not as much. But the other thing that's interesting about this is I almost don't want to make too much of it because Kansas State, they get a lot of fans, but from what I understand, it's not one of the craziest environments out there. They're also not insanely good at home. Since 2021, they're 11-5, which isn't bad, but for as good as they've been, I kind of was surprised to see they've dropped that many home games. So it's not some environment I'm like, wow, there's no way UCF's getting out of with a win. The other thing I found interesting is that We talked a lot about, especially after 2021, like, wow, Gus Malzahn and UCF on the road, bad. Because if you remember in 2021, the only road game they won was Temple, and UCF was injured as hell that year. They lost Gabriel. They were starting a true freshman in Mikey. 2022 to this season, UCF's 5-2 in road games. It's not bad. It's not bad at all.
The one that I can really say was like a glaring like ouch was ECU.
Yeah.
Last year, but they lost the conference title game. They were banged up, lost that at Tulane. I was just thinking it's like actually an interesting picture of how much things have changed when you think like 2016 Michigan. Obviously, they were coming off of 2015, the 0-12 season, but it's like they went into that Michigan game with zero expectations that they would even put up a fight, and now it's like they're going into this game and 50,000 plus at Kansas State, and they're like everyone's like a lot of people are like they're going to win the game.
Yeah,
I think that's a crazy change.
What's funny is that I also think 2016 Michigan really is a sort of a signal changing of UCF, because not only was that the season before they went undefeated, I believe that's the final one-off bye game UCF will ever have played. That was the last one.
Yeah.
Which that was just like a thing in my childhood. Like every season they'd start off with 2 or 3 of those games where they were just going on the road to Power 5 teams who were never coming back. They'd come back when it was the Citrus Bowl days. They'd come back sometimes because it was like what USF's doing now, where it's just like sweet, we'll fill a stadium. But since the bounce house opened, and so that's kind of interesting to look back on. I don't have it right in front of me, but UCF's record, I looked up all their records since they joined the AAC in road games of 50,000 plus. It wasn't bad. I think it was like 5-6 or something like that. They've won some big ones. Louisville in 2013, Penn State in 2013. They've done it before. It's not like this is wow, can UCF win in front of that many people,
Yeah, I think so. Key stat number 2. This matchup features UCF's number 2 rushing offense against Kansas State's number 3 rushing defense.
It's not scary at all.
Yeah, it's like I think we talked about it last week with Timmy, where it was like they can run the ball as well as they have been. Timmy will have to do less because it's always easier when you have a dominant run game. It's going to be a little harder to have a dominant run game when you're facing this Kansas State defense. So,
and my instinct was, okay, they've played Troy and an FCS team as 2 of their games, but Missouri 94 rushing yards against them last week. Yeah. I mean, this feels like a prove it moment for UCF with the running backs. We've talked about a lot how strong their running game is, and I think they are going to prove it. I don't, that's a really tough run defense. I don't think they're going to pop off for 130 yards alone for RJ or something like that. But, I think that this is probably the most worrying stat for me, because I definitely don't think UCF wants to get in a situation where this game is basically on Timmy's shoulders. And if they get a quarter in and the run game can't get going, that's what this is going to be, is Timmy's going to have to beat them. And I think that's not a spot you want to be in if you're UCF.
And I know all of this works together, but unfortunately, like what it's going to be if they can't run the ball, it's not going to be the running backs. It's going to be the offensive line.
Yeah,
it's going to be the K-State defensive line dominating in the trenches, and there being nowhere for any UCF running back to run. That's worrying to me, because I'm just like, I'm not sure UCF's at that level yet where they're not ready, but like that they can physically hold up in the trenches against some of these bigger defensive lines they'll face.
Maybe I'm insane because you say that. Like, I'm imagining the O-line just getting beat up on, and in my brain, I'm like, RJ would be fine. I'm like, he would just dance around and find a way out of it. But you are right. Yeah, and on top of that, we now have 2 different centers. Who knows which one is going to be in? Bula missed last week. We don't know if he's going to be back this week. Adrian Medley got a little banged up in his place, so the O-line is kind of in flux. Gus said that they're trying out a lot of different stuff in practice right now at O-line, so
not really where you want to be, I don't think, 3 games in. Like, I think they probably would like to have it figured out by now. But
they've talked about the depth, all about the depth they have there. So I'm sure they didn't want to be benching their center 3 games into the season. So
I think it's just going to be this all year. It's just going to be, we've got a lot of depth. We're figuring out the offensive line. We're trying out some different things.
Well, some of it's on them and some of it's not. Like and again, I don't know. Did Bula not play because Bula couldn't play, or did Bula not play because he's banged up and they're playing Villanova? I don't know. But it kind of depends, because if it's injury related, it's just, what are you supposed to do? I mean, if there's injuries, you have to find a way around that. But if it's just them, they're like, golly gee, we have so much depth. Let's just start throwing guys out there and seeing what happens. Like, that I don't love as much.
Yeah, but it's better than playing 3 quarterbacks every week and hoping one of them is really
SJ2 is showing Gus the checks that they're writing Amari Kite still, and he's like, maybe Amari Kite can be the right tackle. I was like, let's see what happens.
Yeah, that might be a necessary thing, actually. I don't know. I think so much of this game is going to be about running, like the run game, and I think the trenches in general, because I think UCF's defensive line will have to do a lot of work on that side of the ball, but we'll see how that plays out. And then the final key stat we had was that Kansas State has scored 40-plus points in 4 of its last 5 home games. So it feels almost like, as much as we think it's like a test for UCF's running game, this is going to be the first real test for UCF's defense too.
I have to say a really weird thing that just happened in real time was I made the joke about SJ and the check, and I said that. My phone buzzed, and it was a notification from the Kingdom tweeting at me, and I was like, it just really freaked me out for a second.
They're listening. They've got this podcast bugged.
We're being surveilled.
Why did they tweet at you?
They quote tweeted our live podcast at Nights Out and said that people should go and also order the Nitro, which is the drink there that is supporting the Kingdom. So there you go. The Kingdom says it. Go to the Pegasus Podcast live taping. If the Kingdom says
endorsed by the Kingdom,
you just got endorsed by the Kingdom. Crazy.
Podcast massive.
I've been a Kingdom member for like a month and a half now, and I'm loving it so far. It's so stupid that it's like I'm giving them $25 a month, and I literally in my head I'm like, I'm helping UCF land great players. Like I do feel that way.
Great players like all the ones that they landed in the transfer portal and they paid and have not
okay,
played.
That's only half the battle, though. I hope UCF fans understand that transfer portal is cool, retention is cooler, and without the Kingdom, there are a lot of really, really good players that UCF has right now that probably are not here. So
yeah, even more that would have left because some already did. But yeah, so this key stat
would UCF have the number 2 rushing offense in the country without the Kingdom? I don't think so personally.
Probably not. So yeah, Kansas State scoring a lot of points at home. UCF not allowing a lot of points this season, but also have not played a competent offense. So I don't know. Like I even like Boise State. Like I don't think that was a good offense.
I was going to say, so we're calling Boise State as an incompetent offense. I will say
they had one player that I think really did some damage.
I think that what this stat. I'm sorry, I'm just getting Twitter notifications now about.
Okay, I think I just heard your phone buzz on the table.
Yeah, that's not good. Don't like that. That's picking up on the mic. I think what this stat signals is this isn't one of those games that we've seen UCF win as recently as a week ago, and that we saw a couple times last year where UCF's offense can get stuck in the mud and put up 18 points and UCF wins. I think that the offense needs to produce because Kansas State is going to produce, and there are questions with Kansas State. I think the biggest one, which we referenced earlier, is that Will Howard, their quarterback, did get banged up against Missouri. He was limping on the field. Avery Johnson, who was their true freshman star quarterback, who is like one of their highest rated recruits, if not their highest rated recruit ever, came in relief of him a few times and sort of did the Joey Gatewood special. And that's something to keep an eye on because that's really going to influence things for Kansas State, obviously, and their offense and what it's capable of producing. But either way, they're more than one player. They're a very tough, very deep team. So
yeah, I was curious about the Will Howard thing because I know I was talking to Scott and he was saying that he thinks that it'd be a battle of backup quarterbacks this Saturday. I don't know how serious the Howard thing is. I don't know if it was something where like it got worse after the game on Saturday. Like it kind of just, I don't even know what the injury was. It got swelled up because he did still play a majority of that game. He threw for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I think either way, like it's going to be a test for UCF's defense, no matter who the quarterback is.
So I got to say on that front, I went to the presser day and I checked beforehand. I checked a couple different Kansas State sites and they're not sure he's going to play. It's not like, wow, he might not, he really won't, but it's in question. And I asked Gus about it and he didn't seem like super, like he bought that in his response. And then Jason Johnson later in the presser confirmed that he basically said they're just preparing for Will Howard right now. So I don't know if UCF knows something we don't, but UCF seems to not be expecting him to miss that game.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that.
Maybe they know something we don't. I can't fathom that the coaching staff would not know that was in question when it's like all over Twitter. So maybe they just, who knows? We've got Lane Kiffin out here. Have you seen the Lane Kiffin tweet? And this doesn't relate to UCF, but I thought it was.
Was it the thing
about the Alabama coordinators? Yeah. So Lane Kiffin in his press conference, they asked him about preparing for Alabama's defense. And he was like, well, from looking at the tape, it's very clear that they've basically demoted their defensive coordinator. And this other guy we now believe is calling the defense. Just said that in a press conference. Yeah. So like teams always know stuff that we don't. They usually don't say it in a press conference setting. So maybe UCF is just, for whatever reason, is certain that it's going to be Will Howard.
One of my favorite things that Lane Kiffin does, like when like he'll share articles about like him or about Ole Miss, and like he'll very clearly just like hit the share button like on ESPN app or whatever, and so like auto generates the tweet, and so it's just the headline. So it's like him tweeting Lane Kiffin believes, because that's how I saw it. I just saw Lane Kiffin believes Alabama changed defensive coordinators from Lane Kiffin. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they know that, because if they don't, that would be just kind of really dumb.
But Avery Johnson played last week anyway. So like, I feel like they have to expect that again, because basically they were just bringing him in to do some stuff with his legs because Will Howard clearly wasn't very mobile.
Yeah, he didn't attempt the pass.
Let me ask you a question. You now have the powers to control the world and you get to pick. I don't know why I phrased it that way. Would you rather UCF face Will Howard, who's still recovering and might be a little banged up, or Avery Johnson, who's never started a game in college?
I don't know enough about Avery Johnson, but I'd lean
very highly rated recruit.
Yeah, but I mean, do we know if he's that good yet?
Very highly rated recruit. I've given you the extent of the information I have on Avery Johnson. It's a very highly rated recruit. That I'm out after that. That's what I've got.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, because it just depends on how banged up. Like, it's just if Will Howard's like is limping. I don't know. Usually by the time you get around to a game, a guy who's still banged up isn't really limping out onto the field. It's just if something re-aggravates him, then he'll be more easy to re-aggravate. But I don't know. I'd still probably say Avery Johnson.
Here's my really toxic stance on that. Is that if UCF loses and Will Howard played, then I get to pull UCF was missing their quarterback. And if UCF loses to Kansas State's backup, I don't really get to say that. So I feel like from an excuses perspective, it'd probably be preferable for Will Howard to play.
And the excuses are what you want to look at now that UCF's in the Power 5.
Excuses. This is the game now, guys. It's like what actually happens on the field only. The final score doesn't really matter anymore. It's just how we're going to spin it. Welcome to the Power 5 world.
So, Christian, how can UCF win this game?
I think how UCF will win is if Timmy plays well and is able to do enough things to keep Kansas State honest, which it will open up the run game, and if Will Howard struggles with injury. I think those are your two different paths to success for UCF. I really do think that this isn't a game where Timmy can just hand the ball off and it doesn't really matter who's a quarterback. He's going to have to do enough. He's going to have to hit some of these deep balls to get Kansas State to open up some room for the other guys. I think that's how they win.
Which I think he can do.
I think he can do it too.
I feel pretty good about what we saw from him as the game went on against Villanova. I just think a lot of this is going to be about the trenches, about the offensive line for UCF being able to establish that run game, and being able to protect Timmy. Because if Timmy is capable of escaping and running for his life. He did it at USF, and he did it when he needed to this past weekend. But you don't want him just constantly, like, all of the plays being broken. Like, that's not going to give your offense any sustained success. And I think defensively, as much as it'll be about the trenches, it's just the secondary can't be allowing big play after big play. And I think
feel like I weirdly trust the secondary right now, because you said that and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm super worried about that. Now the Jordan Mask is out. See. Let me say another big one that we just haven't even mentioned is Ricky Barber did not play against Villanova, and I'm operating under the assumption he's going to be back because Gus has just kind of been acting like that's no big deal and acting
he
needs
to play
again in the press. I think it's over if he doesn't play in this game. So we'll see what happens there.
How can UCF lose the game?
I have K-State dominates on the lines and UCF can't effectively move the ball. I think if they get beat in the trenches, if they can't get any kind of run game going, if this game evolves and devolves into Timmy just has to keep chucking it downfield, I think they lose. And I think it could get ugly quickly. So it definitely could. And I think that's part of it is, like, early on, you have to be able to give yourself a reason to believe. And I think they can lose this game as if they fall behind early and then things just kind of snowball. I think a lot of it is, and I don't think it's like the crowd necessarily being the problem, but we just talked about that, but like letting the moment get too big and kind of just doing too much and like racking up penalties and just putting yourself in bad positions. Because I think talent wise, like, you look at both sides and you think like this is fairly even, I think, in terms of talent and skill talent. I think the trenches might be the difference in terms of the personnel, but I think this is a game that they can be in the whole way, but they could also easily take themselves out of the game by just doing stupid things. Yeah, this is a really tough one to predict. I think there are a lot of different variables at play here. And I think we're going to probably within the first few minutes of the game really understand what kind of a game we're in for. But beforehand, it's just tough. I mean, we just haven't really seen UCF do this. Go on the road to a Power 5 team in a league game. Hasn't happened before, ever. And I know they've gone on the road to P5 teams, but this is an interesting one. I mean, when was the last time Kansas State is the best Power 5 team they've played in the regular season since when? 2016?
Yeah.
I mean, so. So this is just hard to predict because it's just not something we've seen. So it's going to be interesting.
We're talking about this now. It's 5:46 on Monday evening, and I'm like getting jittery. Like, I'm really anxious for this game and just ready for it to get here because, I don't know. I think we're going to know very early on whether or not UCF's going to hang around, and it'll be very sad, I think, if they can't. If it's very obvious, that's like, all right, they're just going to get steamrolled. But at least we'll know pretty early, I think.
I just don't think they're going to get steamrolled. I could be wrong, but it's like this team has a lot of talent. It has in a lot of different places. So I feel like like I said, I can see where they don't get steamrolled, but it's the third quarter, they're down double digits and have to start doing stuff they don't normally do and things get out of control. Like that I could see, but I don't think they're going to come out there and just not be competitive. That would really surprise me.
Yeah, I hope not. Tough to predict, but why don't you give it a shot? What's your score?
Tough to predict, but we'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
I have Kansas State winning 35-24. I think that UCF's going to generate some offense. I think they'll get some touchdowns, but I think that Kansas State is I'm worried about the lines. And I'm worried about how physical Kansas State is. And I know the coaching staff is too, because they were out up 19 times today. And this is tough. This is a tough one. I don't think that this is an indictment on the season. I just think this is a really tough first game.
Yeah, I have Kansas State 34, UCF 27. So I have them keeping it a little bit closer, but I don't really feel very confident. Like, I'm like, yeah, they'll only lose by a touchdown, but
so what's funny is I originally had 35-28, and then I thought more about it, and I'm like, they're going to get in the red zone at one point, screwed up, and I'm going to drop them to a field goal for one of those.
Yeah, and I had to. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's so weird where, like, I feel like this is going to happen quite a few times this year where it's like you get to game week and you're like, they could win this game. And you talk yourself into like, yeah, they could win it. And I really think they could win this game, but it's like, I'm not, at least with this one, I don't feel safe predicting them to go into Kansas State and beat them.
Outside of Oklahoma, there is literally no game on the schedule right now where I'm like, they can't win that. They can win all of them. It's just they're not going to because it's tough. So many of these still feel like toss-ups.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out on Saturday night. Again, we will be at Nights Out Pub for the game, and then our post-game podcast, which will probably start near midnight, if not a little bit after.
Our near midnight podcast, which the Kingdom has now told you to go to. So if you believe that UCF should retain very good players, come see our podcast live.
Our Kingdom NIL endorsed podcast will be live at Nights Out Pub. A few things in the football news, something you already mentioned, UCF and Baylor kicking off at 3:30 next weekend on FS1 or FS2. So the home Big 12 debut, which is part of the whole Big 12 homecoming thing. 3:30 kick against Baylor. Baylor's looked really, really bad lately and throughout the first 3 games of the season. I mean, they lost to Texas State. They lost to Utah. Utah's a good team. They had a backup quarterback, and I think even with a backup quarterback, Utah's a good team. And Baylor's defense played well in that game. Baylor only scored 13 points, and then they were up 16-7, I think, at halftime against Long Island, who I didn't know had a football team or was a school. So yeah, they seem pretty vulnerable. Now they also played number 3 Texas this weekend before coming to Orlando.
Variable to keep in mind: Blake Shapen, Baylor's starting quarterback, has not been playing, got hurt against Utah. They said today that he will be out against Texas, but that they expect him to only be out one more week, which means he will be returning for his game against UCF, most likely. Do with that information what you will.
Do you know what the injury is?
You know what? I watched it happen live, and I still don't.
That's the thing is I've done the whole Around the Big 12 thing for Night Sports Now, which you should go read, by the way. But I have not watched Baylor, I don't think, at all this season. I might have watched a little bit of the Utah game. I'm not sure.
I think it actually, now I think about it, I just realized I've watched every Baylor game except Long Island, like almost in entirety. I think he actually got hurt against Texas State. I remember now. It was like, It was some kind of leg injury because he was just having a hard time moving. Like they kept him in throughout it for a while and he just had no mobility.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It was Sawyer Robertson was in his place and he has not been good. He was 10 for 22 against Long Island.
So if Shapen does come back, which he's told the staff projects him to against UCF, a little bit of different game, but I don't know. Yeah. I think Baylor's issues go far beyond who's in at quarterback. So
I think so. And then some of the other things we had here, Gene McDowell will be inducted into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. He's part of this year's class, which also includes Mark Daniels. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but pretty big class, I think, going in this year. They call him the Godfather of UCF football. Is that a term people have used, or the father?
There's quite literally not a UCF football program today without Gene McDowell. Yeah. So I think whatever term you want to use fits.
Right. And then finally, just some UCF and the NFL news. Former UCF wide receiver Brandon Johnson was at the center of some drama in the Broncos game against the Commanders. He had a touchdown catch, and then he caught a Hail Mary as time expired, which then Denver had a chance to tie the game with a 2-point conversion, which they missed. But he caught a Hail Mary. It was kind of similar to the Brashad Perriman one against ECU because this one got tipped at least, but it just kind of like he was behind the defenders in the end zone and it got tipped into his arms. So yeah, it's cool to see him succeed. I think he was somebody who he had a lot of touchdowns. He's a big red zone guy for UCF in 2021. One of their 2 receivers that year. So good to see him succeeding.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Game of the week, another. At least going off of last week's polls, men's soccer polls, another top 5 matchup for UCF coming up this Saturday. They were ranked number 5 last week, and then they drew West Virginia 2-2 in a top 5 matchup. But now UCF's 4-0-2, and they go to number 2 Marshall, who's 7-0 this Saturday, 7:15, just before UCF Kansas State in football. Marshall won the national championship like a few years ago. It's a very good program, and the Sun Belt is just. It's very fun. It's the fun belt in football, but it's also the fun belt in men's soccer because this is a league that has a lot of good programs. So
It is the cream of the crop as far as men's soccer is concerned. So that's exciting for men's soccer. They're having a hell of a year. It's fun. I hope they can keep it up. We will see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to get tough. But tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. A lot to get through here, guys. Okay, so a lot of different ways I could have gone off tweet of the week this week. I think that one of the ways I almost went, but then just so much other stuff happened, was Miami fans. Man, let me tell you, Miami, not a great crowd for their Bethune-Cookman Thursday night game. I decided to have some fun with that and post a photo of Miami's crowd versus UCF crowd, which I have to say to all the Miami fans who replied and said I picked a photo from the end of the game. No, I didn't. The photo was from the middle of the game. That's just how bad your crowd was. I then posted several other photos that fans posted from the first and second quarters that showed that. I mean, they announced 40,000. Like, all jokes aside, that looked like at most 20,000 people in the entire stadium, which is crazy. So I have to give tweet of the week to all the Miami fans who they have a new line, which they've been using. I've seen it in a lot of my replies where they come in and say, well, we're a private school and we don't have a lot of students. And I'm like, that's correct. Thank you for explaining why you don't have fans. That still doesn't change that you don't have fans. It also doesn't change that 20 years ago, Miami packed their stadium and they don't now. So where did they go, guys? I'm curious. There was one Miami.
It's like they're subtly admitting they're not a brand anymore.
Yes. And there was one Miami fan in particular who replied to me. It was the dumbest one. I don't have the tweet in front of me. I think he was the guy who was like Tommy Castellanos' trainer or something at one point. And he, in the same tweet, told me that I need to deal in facts and pay attention to facts. And also said that 90% of a stadium for each game is students.
That's just not a fact.
That's just, didn't you guys realize that 90% of each college football team stadium are fans who don't pay to get in? It's just such a moneymaker. I don't get how people.
Did he mean 9%?
That would be accurate. That would be, I love, that's one of the things all about social media is people will so confidently be dumb. Like, they will just say things that are just clearly not true. But I found that one in particular interesting just because, and I get it, he's defending his school, whatever, but I just found it funny that he said deal in facts and also listed something that was blatantly wrong. So shout out to all the Miami fans who said varying things like that. Other big one was USF fans for two different things. One, rooting for Timmy to fail and saying he sucks. That was great. Great look on you guys. Really hilarious to compare that situation. Like, Timmy McClain was USF starter as a true freshman, was then benched for a transfer, and he leaves, and USF fans are like, we hate you and hope you fail in all your future endeavors. You go over to UCF, Mikey Keene started as a true freshman, was benched for a transfer and leaves, and UCF fans are like, yeah, go Mikey, hope you do well. So says a lot about the 9 USF fans out there. Other thing about USF, I got to give tweet of the week, or one of the many tweet of the weeks I'm giving out, to the actual USF official athletics account who tweeted the attendance for the Alabama game, 65,138, and said, thank you, Bulls Nation. And I just want to also join USF athletics, to thank Bulls Nation. The 5% of the stadium they made up really was not missed. So I, of course, made fun of that on Twitter because, yes, no one makes you tweet your attendance. There's no obligation to do that. And they went out of their way to tweet their attendance and thank Bulls Nation for all
the thing is, like, even if you want to tweet the attendance and say something about I don't know, like, you just can't be like, thank you, Bulls Nation, for filling the stadium. Like, it was not USF fans that filled the stadium. You could have said I don't know. You could have done anything. You could have just said tonight's attendance or today's attendance and put the attendance number. You still would have gotten a bunch of jokes, but at least you wouldn't have said Nation. You wouldn't have insinuated that it was USF fans that filled that stadium.
And my one on top of that was, I then made fun of that, as you do. And Bull in the Bay replied to me and said, exposure is exposure, my dude. UCF is undefeated in a Power 5 and no one is talking about them. 0, not even one AP Top 25 vote. USF fans are running laps on Twitter, high-fiving, going, we're being talked about. And here's how they're being talked about. And this isn't like me. Everyone nationally is saying, wow, I can't believe that Alabama played a close game with one of the worst programs in all of FBS. Is Nick Saban over? That's how far this sad little program has fallen, is that they've gone from bragging about, we were number 2 for 6 days. So they're now like, oh my God, can you believe it? Our name is showing up in some headlines about how bad we are historically. And I get that fans are crazy. Like, every fan for every team is crazy. UCF fans are crazy. USF fans are crazy. They're all crazy. We're all insane. That's why we're here. But to be excited about that, to be like, I'm so thrilled that people are talking about Alabama almost losing to us as what an apocalyptic thing that is because of how horrible USF is and how USF is at this point probably the worst FBS program of the last 4 years. They've lost 18 straight games against FBS opponents. And they're just over the moon excited. They're just sad people. I don't know what else to say about it.
That's the thing. Is like, I don't know. Like, of the things that you could choose from Saturday to be like excited about, you could be excited about how your defense played in that game. I know like Alabama's quarterbacks were 2 of the worst I've ever seen play a football game. But I think USF like hung in the game. Their defense played well. Their offense couldn't do anything. Their defense played well. Like you can be excited about your coach. You can be excited about the way that they played. But it's just weird to be like, oh, like we're getting exposure for this effort and this like valiant performance. It's like, no, everyone's questioning how Alabama didn't win by 40. Like I don't know. It's a weird thing it's a weird avenue to be excited about, considering there are actual real things I think that they could take away from that game to be excited about. I also like that he called you my dude, like he's Argyle from Stranger Things. That was the first thing that popped in my head. It just made me think of that.
There were a lot of USF. I also like a couple of USF fans replied to things, and I laughed at this because they were like, "Wow, UCF fans are in the Power 5 and they still care about us." It's like, yes, I've been a UCF fan my whole life. We're rivals. That's how this works. I love watching you fail, and I'm going to continue to love watching you fail, no matter how better of a conference UCF is than yours. I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. Congrats on your failure. I'm looking forward to more of it throughout the season.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Who do they have this week? Isn't this week they play Rice?
I don't care who. Yes, they do, because a USF fan tweeted that it is the first ever AAC game between AAU members. Saddest fan base in sports. I don't know how they even go on being fans of this team. I guess you just have to grasp at something at this point when they're that historically awful. Terrible program. Ugh. Terrible. just unspeakably horrible at football, and have been for many years now. Thank you for the quarterback, though. We do appreciate it. And Colorado says thank you for Jimmy Horn. See, you guys had like 4 good players. They're all on other teams now.
Wasn't the other one from USF too? Was Xavier Weaver a USF player or no? I thought they had another player somewhere. Maybe it was in Colorado. But yeah, they've had some good players that have moved on to better programs.
Also, all of them, we're just gonna keep going. All of them talking about how, well, us playing Alabama close signals that we've made it. Does no one remember how they almost beat Florida last year and then lost to Louisville 42-3 the next week? Like, am I the only person that remembers that? Is that just me?
No, I had this kind of similar things, because even early on in that game when they were hanging around, I was like, they almost beat Florida last year, and that's just like, now they're like hanging around with Alabama, but they still suck. Like,
I can't wait for Rice to absolutely cook them this weekend, and they're going to go on Twitter and be like, "Well, that's like Rice. That was an AAU member we lost to. I mean, that's prestigious. UCF lost to Kansas State, and they don't even have satellite campuses. Like, they'll do some dumb crap like that on Twitter. I just watch it happen, guys. Like, seriously, sad fan base.
Rice cooker. Made me laugh more than it should have, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. This whole it's because the thing is, like, it's such a bizarre, like, oh, you still care about us. Like, UCF fans do it to USF people too, where they're like, oh, like, this rivalry's dead, like you're still talking. I'm like, no, UCF fans are engaging with USF fans, and USF fans are engaging with UCF fans. So it's like, it's very clearly still like a back and forth, even though both sides are like, wow, like we've moved on. Or like,
it's the exact same thing as the Texas A&M rivalry, where it's like, and Vanini tweeted this once, where he basically said that like the War on I-4 rivalry is not even a rivalry. It's just both programs are desperate to be able to say that the other one is irrelevant. Like, that's what it is. They want to be able to say we're relevant and you're not. And that's the whole thing. It's not even about like the Egg Bowl or like Oklahoma, Texas is all like, man, we hate you and really, really love playing you and beating you. And it's great when we beat you. And UCF, USF are over here like comparing like television dollars and attendance figures and like who got what TV window. Like, that's what matters to UCF, USF. It's just like a fight for who's relevant. And let me tell you, USF, you playing a close game with Bama does not make you relevant. It makes you the end of a headline where you are not the story. Congratulations. Enjoy it. You will not be talked about again the rest of the season. Probably not next season either, because you're a terrible program.
Might have been the longest tweet of the week segment ever.
And we went on for a while. Hey, Alex Golish, though, he was really good as UCF's OC, where he didn't call plays and did try to sign 15 tight ends in one class for some reason. Still not sure what that's about.
I forgot about that.
So yeah. maybe there's a brighter horizons.
And there's only so much of a ceiling, even if there are brighter horizons. But
yeah, I mean, before this, they hired Jeff Scott, who was considered one of the greatest up and coming coaches in all of college football, and they fired him after 2 years. So clearly, they know what they're doing over there. But yeah,
yeah, it's great.
Unwinnable situation, some are saying.
Yeah,
all right, I'm done. I swear.
All right, cool. We're good. Thank you guys for listening so much. Thank you guys. All the USF fans maybe hate listening to that segment would be great. Just drive those listens up. But thank you guys for joining us. Keep leaving us those 5-star reviews with your 5-star review questions. We'll continue to get to them each week. And again, please join us on Saturday night at Nights Out Pub for the Kansas State game and for our post-game podcast after the game. Of course, that's at 3402 Technological Avenue in Suite 202, right off University Boulevard, close to UCF's campus. We'll be back Saturday night with episode 162. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at Bailey J. Adams22, at by CA Simmons, and at Night Sports Now. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you Saturday.
We've been through 2 U.S. president administrations since USF last beat UCF. Bye, everybody.